Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of What's Your Next? Dave, we have a very exciting episode today, which will actually probably be broken into multiple episodes because we are jam-packed full of content today. So we're just going to go ahead and dive in. Now, we always start with a myth or fact. So, question for you, Dave. Myth or fact? Did we know all of the questions that we were supposed to ask to help us pick our perfect franchise?
Well, I'm going to go with myth.
Myth is right, which is why we are recording this episode today. Because if we had to do it over, that's what we're going to be sharing with you today. Now, there are many things that Dave and I have in common, but one of those is that we both love football. You want to tell the story why, Dave?
Oh, sure. So a long time ago, many years ago, 30 some of them, Stacy and I were at a Super Bowl party that I and my roommates were hosting, and Stacy came with her friends, and during the pregame show, I noticed she had on a Redskins sweatshirt. I said, Redskins, I would be the Commanders today,
Right.
to be politically correct. And I was sitting, a few seats away from her next to somebody else, and I was like, well, she has a Redskin thing on. I'm going to make this fun. I'm going to go bet her that the Redskins were going to lose the game. And so I went over, I sat down next to her, introduced myself, and we had met before, kind of indirectly. And I came over and sat down and made this bet. I said, I bet you that for every touchdown that the Redskins score, I will drink a beer. And for every touchdown that the Denver Broncos score, which happened to be the opposing team in the Super Bowl, you will drink a beer. And the moral of the story was that I believe the score was 44-10. The Redskins won. So,
yeah, he's a mess.
Needless to say, I lost that bet pretty bad.
But did you really lose?
Yeah, I did not, of course. It was a great bet because here we are, 31 years later of marriage, and everything has been absolutely wonderful.
So that's why we love football so much. And so many people love football also. And we all tend to kind of be the armchair quarterback, right? We just sit back and he should have done that and he should have done that. And why didn't he do that? Or why did he do that, right? And it's easy to be the armchair quarterback. Well, one thing you may not know about us, in addition to us loving football, is that we still own a franchise today, 16 years later. So today, we want to play armchair quarterback and look back at if we were to do it again, would we do it again? But more importantly, what questions could we, should we have asked? Because this is what we help our clients do today so that they can make an informed decision and pick a franchise that's a great fit for them. All right. So you ready to get started, Dave?
I'm absolutely ready. Let's go.
All right. Well, you know us. We love to be transparent and share the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the first thing we want to talk about is when you're looking at different franchise concepts, the most important thing you want to do is get clarity. Get clarity on that franchise's strengths and weaknesses. So Dave, you want to give a little bit of a background on the model of our franchise and let's kind of paint the story a little bit so that the audience can understand how you kind of get some clarity on strengths and weaknesses.
That's really great. I definitely will do that. So we went into this franchise. Again, this was our first franchise. We had come out of running another business, so we had business experience. And we kind of went into it like, oh, we know everything. What can they possibly teach us in franchise? But we want this time, a proven system. We want a system that
been proven
we can just implement and be successful, because we felt that with our background and business strengths that we would be able to just take anything that was already kind of predefined and run with it and really make it work. So a little bit about the business model of this franchise. It's a coffee and smoothie franchise that really was developed originally on what they call a events model, meaning that most of the business that was done by the franchisees at events. They would go out to certain events, or they would set up in a stadium or wherever there's a crowd, and they would serve their coffees and smoothies in those environments. And that was really how the franchise grew so quickly and became successful to that point. What started to happen over time was that the franchise eventually saw a need, and probably just from the feedback about their products. Their products are really, really, really high quality products. People love them. And I believe probably what was happening is everybody, like what was happening to us, is they would ask, where's your store?
Right. We love this. Where can we get it? Where's your store?
Where's your store?
So ding, ding, ding. Let's open up a store, right?
Yeah, ding, ding, ding. The franchisor ran out and decided that, hey, we need to be in brick and mortar too. So we see this today with the franchisors we work with, where the franchisors want to have a multiple revenue stream model, which means that, for instance, in the food service business, it's common for them to have both brick and mortar and some type of mobile concepts available under the same franchise. And in our franchise, they started mobile and went towards brick and mortar. What we see more today is we see those that are going from brick and mortar to more mobile, which both concepts work. So that's really the overall arching framework for how, when we went to get this franchise, what we were expecting was to really work pretty much exclusively doing events.
Well, right. And so it was an event-based model, something that's super fun and sexy, right? And then everybody loved the product. And they're like, great, where's your store? And everybody was asking this within the system. So the franchisor said, okay, great, let's set up stores. What was the problem, Dave?
Well, the issue was that the management team that was in place at the franchisor really didn't have the experience.
They had never opened a store themselves. They didn't have a system.
They did not have a store of their own. They were not super familiar with real estate, negotiating leases, which we'll get to in a little bit. And they kind of rushed into trying to deliver this concept to the franchisees. And we were one of the ones that early on,
and we rushed it,
wanted to run down this route. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this episode.
Right. Great. All right. So you really need to think about that. So what are the franchise's strengths and weaknesses, and kind of where are they headed? But you also want to look at some other things. One of those would be the product, right? You're buying into a franchise to not only be able to have the brand name, but to be able to offer the product. In our business, it was the coffees and smoothies. Now, they had an amazing product. The challenge was they had one vendor. And what happens, ... when that vendor comes back and wants to double their price, or they go out of business, or there's distribution challenges. So remember, Dave, there was a time when there were strawberry shortages.
Yeah, I don't remember that. And bananas.
Right. And our franchise literally could not get strawberries. And if they did, it was going to be like 5 times the price. So these are considerations when you're looking at a franchise. How and where do they get their product? How is it sourced? Who owns it? There are franchises where they actually make their own product. Well, are there pros and cons to that? And then there are franchises where they outsource their product. So understanding the product piece of it, where and how and who is the vendor and how and where are you going to get your product, is definitely something you're going to want to understand, which then ties into distribution. How are you going to get your product? And wow, do we have some stories here. You want to share, Dave?
Yeah, I certainly do. I'll give you both distribution nightmares that we had to deal with. The first one was early on when we were just doing the events, or in the event model business. We were running this out of a warehouse, and we had, at the time, we had commercial freezers and stuff like that to store the product in for what we were doing. We had some shelving. The issue was that two things. One is that we had a minimum product order.
Yeah.
At the time, we had to order an entire pallet of this mix, this smoothie mix, or none, meaning that.
Right. So think about, right? You need 2 boxes of smoothie mix.
Right. And
but you have to order a whole pallet in order to get some.
Thousands of dollars, right, to order one pallet. That wasn't even the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge was that where our warehouse was, it was not conducive in any way, shape, or form in having a tractor trailer pull up and deliver a pallet of anything. So what ended up happening is that the distribution company refused to pull their truck in there, and the landlord of the property wouldn't even allow it. So there was 2 problems with that. Ended up negotiating with us to meet them at the shopping mall, and we would drive our truck over there, unload an entire pallet into our truck, drive it back to our warehouse, and load it back into the storage facility. So you can see that was definitely a lot of extra work and a challenge. The second distribution challenge we had was when we had brick and mortar locations. We had 2 locations in an airport, and the first issue was that when we wanted to source things that were on the menu that weren't directly related to this franchise's product mix at the time, because what happened was they were only really in the coffee and smoothie business. We were in the airport and we were doing additional things like muffins and juice drinks. We had to do other things in the airport. The airport absolutely pretty much required it for us to even have facilities there. So the challenge was that we had to work with multiple vendors and coordinate getting all this stuff in there on a regular time. And in the airport, it's not easy because they don't even distribute the stuff to where your actual store locations are. It goes to a commissary building or a distribution building that's half a mile away, and then gets shipped over to your place by them, and it was extraordinarily expensive. So it was a real challenge to be able to work with this franchise to get things in a reasonable cost that we could offer that weren't their products. And we paid royalties to them for these third-party sales. So by the time we would add it all up, in a lot of cases, the third-party products netted us almost nothing.
Right.
And that's really because the distribution wasn't well organized and wasn't really well thought through.
Right. So to summarize this up is know where your product's coming from, how easily you can get it, understand the distribution model, right? Is there distribution in place? How much do you need to order? Because that's going to impact your cash flow and money that you're going to need perhaps to invest in inventory. How quickly can you get it replenished? And what happens if there are issues with the vendor, if it's an outsourced kind of model? So these are some of the criteria and questions that you're going to want to ask as you're talking to different franchise concepts. The next thing that you're going to want to consider is the competition.
Meet the competition.
Right? If you're going to invest in a franchise, you want to know who your competitors are going to be. So is there room for another player? I mean, we were kind of a very small coffee smoothie concept, and guess who our competition was?
Well, we know who our competition was.
What everybody drinks, right? That white cup with the green logo on it.
We had more than that, but they were the big one.
And so maybe that's a good thing, right? Because I think competition can be a good thing. It means that there is business, there is opportunity.
There's a market there for that.
Right. It means there's a market. But you should really understand it, right? Is there room for you to come in? Do you understand the local dynamics that are happening? Are customers or clients very attached to who they currently use, and why ultimately would they want to do business with you? The next thing you're going to want to look at is the brand. Now, when you're paying for a franchise fee, this is definitely what you're investing in. You're investing in that brand, that name, that logo. So how is that brand represented, and how important is it to you in order to get new business in your area? Now, in our coffee smoothie business, people loved our products, right? But Dave, would you say that the name or the brand was an important part of the franchise?
I think it's the most important part of a franchise, and I'll tell you why. I'll give you an example. When we went out to do events, we'd be there generally with, multiple other vendors set up, somehow in a row with them, or, even in stadiums and stuff like that. And to get people to buy our product, is particularly in the early days, we had to do something called sampling. And we had to do a lot of it. I mean, we had to have people standing out in the front offering our product to them to try. And it was instant. It was love at first sight once they tasted
They loved it.
Yeah, they would literally go up, take their whole family up and buy a whole slew of smoothies or, whatever we were offering that day. So it was a great product, but didn't have a well-known brand name. And as Stacy said, when you think about it, we're literally there competing, with other brands that are a lot more well-known for these types of products, like, which one we're talking about. And there's another one with it has an M that started serving smoothies after a while. So, and again, competition can be great. It's only great if your brand can stand out and your brand can be important in that market space.
So I think for us, in the beginning, we didn't have name or brand recognition, at least in our local area. But as Dave said, we were sampling, we got our product into as many people's mouths as possible. And then people started talking about it, and there was brand recognition, and people were literally naming our smoothies, and they were tagging us on social. And I would say it probably took about 2 years actually for us to kind of really build a strong name. But then we had that brand recognition, right?
It took a while. It really did.
Now, the other side of that is that if people love your product and people are seeing that they love your product, people may try and knock you off. You want to talk about how that happened to us, Dave?
I can certainly talk about that too. We were, one of the locations where we were set up was in a football stadium. I'm not going to name anybody here. They had us on all 3 floors or concourses of their stadium. We were there. We had a 3-year agreement with them to serve our smoothies only. We served everything. We did smoothies and coffees and actually hot chocolate. So we served them on all 3 floors for 3 years. And our contract was up for renewal. And they said, oh, gee, you know what? We don't want to have you back anymore. We're like, well, that sucks. Why? Well, we're going to do it ourselves.
We're going to build our own tiki bar, put a purple surfboard on it, and we're just going to put smoothies out of a machine. We can do them really fast that way, and we get to keep all the money.
Yeah, so that's what happened, right? I mean, this can happen to you. So literally overnight, we were out of this stadium, and somebody else was pretty much doing something like what we were doing. We won't call it the same by any means, but they copied the concept,
right?
Not necessarily the product or the quality of what we delivered.
Are these designer or knockoff?
So beware of knockoffs. So know who your competition is. Beware of the knockoffs. And when you're looking at your brand and understanding how important it is, I think another example is obviously your location. So Dave, talk about being in an airport and how important is a brand name in an airport location?
Again, it's everything. We were in an airport, and I don't want to understate this because we did pretty well there as a whole. The only thing is that we had major brand competition. This airport is one of the busiest airports in the world, not just, here in our area. And when people are walking around and they're looking for something, they go to things that they recognize.
Right.
They're going to run right over to the S word.
Whatever right.
Yeah, or they're going to run right over to the D word or the M word, and because they recognize this. This is the power of a brand. We had to work really hard to make this concept work in this airport by differentiating ourselves. And again, this came from our business prior experience and pivoting, being able to pivot when things are difficult. We noticed that in this particular wing of the airport where we had our stores, that there wasn't a lot of breakfast options. And so we really focused our menu and our messaging to bring people to our stands for breakfast. And that was really the thing that made these locations work without having a great brand. So we did well with this concept at the airport over time, but it didn't start that way. I mean, it was the same thing. We had nobody at our stands. We've got our employees out there, with bright floral shirts on, standing out, handing out samples to everybody coming by, and basically guerrilla marketing them into buying stuff from us as they walk past. And that's not brand recognition. That is guerrilla marketing.
Right. So actually, an airport location can be great for a brand, but brand on a big scale, meaning the franchisor, because they're getting, so many eyeballs looking at their sign and menu and store. Maybe not so good for you as a local operator. I mean, as Dave said, we were in a huge international airport. Are people who are traveling overseas going to ultimately be our customers on a local level? No, probably not. So it's important that you really understand the dynamics of brand and what it means and how you can benefit from it, both on a local, a regional, and a national basis. So those are some considerations and questions to ask related to brand. The next thing you're going to want to get some clarity on is support and training. After all, when you're buying a franchise, you're buying this system, and they all talk about the training and the support that you get. But what are you really getting? Now, Dave, did we get some training with our franchise?
I can't say no. I mean, we did. I mean, we learned, I think we got a very good grasp on how to run the mobile model, the events model. I think they did a really nice job with that training. We got zero training or even assistance on how to run a brick and mortar. So it's very important that, depending on your franchise, if they're adding on new models, make sure you get the training and they have it available with that model before you invest in whatever it is they're asking you to do, because you might be on your own. I mean, we had to literally work the brick and mortar model ourselves, without a lot of assistance, just by a lot of it being trial and error,
Right.
And that's not the way, if you're buying a franchise that you want the proven system. You want to buy what they're good at.
Right. And so with training and support, a lot of the franchises that we work with, they have really great training, right? And most of them make you come on site, or some of them will come out to you, but make sure you understand what is training, how is it accomplished, and is there any fee for it? But more so than that, what happens after training, right? On the support piece, what happens 3, 6, 9 months down the road when you have a question, an issue, or a problem? Who do you contact? What if it's 6 in the morning? What if it's 10 at night? What if it's on a weekend? Make sure you understand where and how you get support. As Dave was alluding to, in our airport location, the support really became a big issue between us and the franchisor, mostly because they didn't have the experience to give us any support because they had never done it themselves. But we had run into a challenge where they wanted us to pay royalties on top of our ad fee for products that were quote unquote non-proprietary, meaning they didn't make them, create them, sell them to us, like the coffees and the smoothies. So we had permission to sell these other products, but they were demanding to take a huge percentage of the sales, but they were doing nothing for us. They weren't supporting distribution, anything.
Nothing. Yeah, exactly. So we were on our own. And this is the lesson learned, is that, just because they have a new sexy model available in the revenue model, be sure that you ask all these questions in advance. How are you helping me? Why is this going to work for me? And how are you going to help me be successful? Because I feel like that's where the biggest part of where our franchise came unglued was when they went out of their core strength, which was the event model, and tried to support brick and mortar. And I think we probably got more information by talking to other vendors who's, at the airport, asking them questions about, how to make this stuff work than we ever got from our franchisor.
Right. So, really important questions to ask. And when you work with us, we're going to give you a checklist. We're going to help you hone in on the questions that you want to ask each of the different franchises, because the questions will be different and we're familiar with all of them. And the the next one that we're going to talk about to close out today's issue, which is passionate to Dave and my heart, is marketing, right? You can buy a franchise, you can have the recipe and the proven system, but you still got to do marketing. So how is your franchise going to help you with that? Dave, what kind of marketing help did we get from our franchise?
All right. I want to say 0, but I'll say 1 out of 10. How about that?
Yeah.
All right.
So it's probably...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Let me just finish this statement on that because I'm passionate about this statement. It's the same thing. We probably got more information about marketing for food service, for the food service business. And this is part of a franchise, and this is a benefit from the other franchisees than we ever got from the franchisor. They were the ones that were telling us, you need to try to do this, you need to try to do that. You got to sample. I mean, it's the only way you're going to get this to work, because without a brand, we talked about the brand, without a brand, marketing becomes even more critical.
Brand.
Marketing is so important. And so you need to understand and ask your franchise what kind of assets and how do they help you, and what, especially on a local level, because the franchisor tends to always think of beating their own chest, and they more think in bigger branding terms, like, do people know our name and are they aware of us and do they like our logo, kind of a thing. But on a local level, you got to talk about guerrilla marketing, right? And so what does your franchise do to help you? More so than do they give you a few social media posts, but what kind of marketing assets and how easy are they to create and to produce? We have some franchises we work with where you can very easily go in and customize and make materials that you can use on a local level. And some of them, it's like pulling teeth. They don't do anything. You have to go get your own website and figure out social media on your own. And you want email marketing? Oh, well, go figure it out. So marketing is really important because, look, let's face it, that's how you get your customers and clients. So make sure that you understand the marketing piece of it, especially because a lot of people who go into franchising, I think they're not so marketing oriented, right? They don't necessarily come from the marketing background, which is why a franchise can be a great solution for them, because those pieces, those assets, those procedures are already in place. So Dave, I think, we went so long on just this one area of a franchisor's strengths and weaknesses and some of the considerations and aspects that they should be looking at. We're going to continue this, right?
I think
Dot.
We've got more.
We've got more. So make sure you stay tuned for part 2 of If We Had to Do It Over Again. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.